RPN, the Roddenberry Podcast Network.
This episode of Mission Log is brought to you by Eaglemoss Hero Collector and the brand new The Orville Official Ships Collection. The first ships in the collection, including the Orville itself, are available now at herocollector.com/Orville. Use code MISSION10 at checkout to get 10% off your purchase with free shipping.
Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast, episode 381, Children of Time.
Welcome into another episode of Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. I'm John Champion.
And I'm Norman Lau. Each week on Mission Log, we take our time looking back in time at the time spent by each crew on Star Trek exploring their own morals and ethical dilemmas.
This week, Children of Time, a story in which the DS9 crew meet their great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandchildren and then try to figure out if they should wipe them out of existence. I'll have trivia for you in a moment, but first, Norman will tell you how to reach us.
And I will try and get through this as quickly as possible because we don't have the time, and it's no time to make jokes about time.
I thought we had all the time in the world.
What was I saying? Mission Log relies on your participation, so that's why we want to hear from you. Help us spread the word by giving us a like or a share on Facebook or Twitter, where you'll find us at Mission Log Pod. Your reviews at Apple Podcasts help other people find the show, and we do appreciate it. You can reach us on Skype at Mission Log Pod or by calling 323-522-5641. Our email address is missionlog@roddenberry.com. And remember, we may use your comments on an upcoming episode of Mission Log. We have all the trivia in the world
right.
with John Champion.
I'll get to it. Thank you. So trivia for Children of Time. We have here a story by Gary Holland and Ethan H. Kalk. Now, this is a really interesting way to develop a story. Gary was actually on the lot already since he was an advertising and promotions executive at Paramount. He had been watching DS9, and way back in Season 2, he had sold the story and wrote the teleplay for The Collaborator. Ever since, he was intrigued by the idea of something developing between Odo and Kira. What he pitched, though, was too early in the series, it was felt. So Ira Stephen Bear sat on it. Meanwhile, Ethan Kalk, who was a school teacher in Texas, had his own story pitch independent of this one, but it was very similar to Gary's. So what to do? Both stories were purchased and both writers were credited, even though they didn't work together at all in the process. In fact, they were both given 5 days to write their story drafts, and then the producers decided what they liked. So this is kind of like everyone tossing around story ideas for Star Trek II, but then the final story and script had to be assembled by Nick Meyer. In this case, it was DS9 writer-producer Renee Echevarria who put those pieces together, and that's why he gets teleplay credit here. It was directed by Alan Croker, and we've only really just started to see Alan's name here on DS9, though he was simultaneously directing on Voyager, and he will really take the crown as the finale king of Star Trek as the series progress. So far, we've covered his work this season with The Assignment and The Ascent. So there's a good amount of location footage on this episode. They shot out near Ventura and Amundsen Ranch. You'd need to drive more than an hour northwest of LA to get there. They had a very difficult time of it all. Weather did not cooperate. It was cold and windy, and they had to shoot the big planting scene essentially backwards in order to get the best lighting for the big group shots. And as it got later, they filmed the close-ups, and the crew were all in winter coats while the actors were sprayed with water to make it look like they were sweating. Oh, and I love this bit of trivia, that the stasis chamber on board the Defiant, that's the device that Dr. Bashir sort of pours Odo into to leave him there for a bit. It's a bread maker. They took an off-the-shelf bread maker and put some lights on it and some graphics, and boom, now it's a stasis chamber. Let's talk about guest stars. Tons of guest players in this one, and we'll focus on a few of them. 3 young people that we meet are Gabriel, Molly, and Lisa. Gabriel is played by Jesse Littlejohn, whose TV appearances start in the mid-90s with ER, and by the end of the 90s and early 2000s, he was racking up a few film and indie credits. Molly is played by Doran Fine, an actor who had recurring roles on Days of Our Lives and even Beverly Hills 90210. Lisa is played by Davita Williams, who's been working almost non-stop since she was about 6 years old. She has soap opera credits, TV guest, and independent film titles to her name, though she may be best known to some audiences for a big recurring role on Lizzie McGuire. We also spend time with 3 Klingon-ish characters. One of them, uncredited, is played by David R. Mayer, and while he has some acting credits, he's also an artist, and he has some really intriguing paper crafts up on his site, EduCraft Diversions. Then we've got Brian Chandler as Brota, and he has a few other credits, including Brother to Brother and Phil of the Future. Then there's Mary Beth Massette, who's playing Perel. This marks her first professional credit in front of the camera, but Mary Beth also works as a producer, and she even had a role in the feature film The Social Network. While this is her only Trek appearance, she does have another Klingon in her life. She's married to Patrick Massette, who played Duras in TNG in Sins of the Father and Reunion. Jennifer Parsons plays Miranda O'Brien, one of the Chief's descendants. This is the first time we're seeing her on Trek, but technically she had a bit part earlier in the Voyager pilot, so we'll try to point her out when we get there in a while. This isn't her first sci-fi cred, though. If you go back to those heady days of 1982, she appeared on both The Phoenix and The Powers of Matthew Starr. In addition to her many TV guest roles, like a lot of them on Murder One, Jennifer also appears in the Drew Barrymore feature film Never Been Kissed. And finally, the newest and oldest Dax that we meet is Yedrin, played by Gary Frank. In the 1970s, Gary picked up an Emmy when he was co-starring on the popular drama Family. Through the 80s and 90s, he made a ton of TV guest appearances and recurring roles on shows from Hill Street Blues to Remington Steele. He even did 3 turns on The Love Boat. This is his only Star Trek appearance.
And now Norman will bring us up to speed on what happens when explorers in space meet the children of time.
Prologue. The Defiant and her crew are returning home to Deep Space Nine after a week-long recon mission in the Gamma Quadrant. At breakfast, Dax laments the less-than-comfortable bunks, to which Kira adds that she could use a visit to the Golian Spa. Kira also confesses that she and Shakar aren't seeing each other anymore, which disquiets Odo, as he curtly says he has no opinion on the subject and hastily leaves the mess hall. Later on the bridge, Captain Sisko declines being offered a Raktajino, saying that he's trying to cut down, as the chief worries aloud about not having enough time to finish Molly's birthday dollhouse. Dax receives some unusual readings from a nearby solar system, and Kira adds that there could be life forms on the surface of the 4th planet. Strongly insisting on surveying these readings, Dax assures Benjamin that with a few shield modifications, approaching the planet would be smooth sailing. However, as the Defiant enters the planet's quantum barrier, the bridge surges with energy, causing Kira to be struck by an electrical discharge, which briefly phases her in 2. Kira assures Sisko that she's all right, as the chief reports that the Defiant will need major repairs and is grounded for the time being. Suddenly, the Defiant is hailed, and Sisko and the crew are stunned to see a human female and a Trill male who address Captain Sisko by name and invite him, Dax, Worf, and O'Brien to meet with them on the surface. The 2 strangers introduce themselves as Miranda O'Brien and Yedrin Dax, descendants of the Defiant that crash-landed on this planet 200 years ago. Act 1. As Sisko and his crew are trying to get their bearings, Yedrin Dax asks Jadzia to scan him to prove he is telling her the truth. Proof in the form of the Dax symbiote he is hosting. Miranda O'Brien is in fact a direct descendant of the Chief and Ensign Rita Tannenbaum, as Miranda relates to Miles that he, like many others, accepted what happened and moved on. However, Yedrin Dax senses Sisko's doubt and assuages it quickly by almost telling everyone a secret that only old man Curzon Dax and Benjamin would know. As the group walks through what seems to be a village center, they observe two girls being taught math by Quark? Well, at least an interactive Quark teaching program. He was always good with numbers, Miranda quipped. Worf asks if they ever tried to send out a distress call, but Yedrin explained that Defiant's accident took place 200 years before the discovery of the wormhole, and there was no one to contact. Yedrin also tells Sisko that weeks after the crash, Kira did in fact die from the effects of the energy discharge she suffered when approaching the planet. In order to save her, they would have to leave the planet and avoid the accident that caused them to crash 200 years ago. But if that happens, then this colony and this timeline would cease to exist, right? Well, it turns out that Yedrin Dax has a plan. He's been studying what happened to Kira, and that if he can replicate the quantum effect that created her quantum duplicate, he would be able to do the same to the Defiant as it leaves the planet, causing one to escape and one to replicate the accident, preserving the timeline. Everyone got that? Meanwhile, back on the Defiant, Kira is resting as Dr. Bashir places a full container of Odo in a stasis chamber, as the planet's quantum field is keeping him from shapeshifting. Odo is fine for the moment. Kira, however, needs immediate neural pathway treatment back on Deep Space Nine. As Dr. Bashir leaves to meet with his descendants, a familiar yet strange face greets Kira as she's resting. It is Odo, but unlike any version she's seen before. Familiar, more refined, and certainly more emotionally open to her than ever before, as he says that he loves her and has always loved her. Act 2. Kira admits that she never knew Odo's true feelings for her, but how could she? Odo admits that he did everything to hide his truth from her, to spare both of them what could have happened to their friendship if anything between them went wrong. And even though Odo has not seen Kira for over 200 years, all he wants to do, and all he is offering to do, is to spend what little time they have together on Gaia. Back in the settlement, Captain Sisko has his hands full with his descendants, quite literally, as Dax informs him that Yedrin's plan is going to work. Nearby, Worf and Dr. Bashir are surveying the town to make sure they are provided the supplies they need. Julian is thrilled and annoyingly prideful that his descendant is a doctor. Just then, a young boy, Gabriel, announces that the Klingons are here, as two humans and one faintly defined Klingon appear armed with spears and knives. They are the sons of Moog, Worf's descendants, either by blood or by choice, and have arrived to honor Worf's return. Worf honors them in kind by accepting that he will feast with them. On the Defiant, Jadzia and Yedrin are in engineering, as Yedrin reminisces about Jadzia's wedding, telling her that Worf is a good man, and that in time she will learn to handle him. Back in town, O'Brien is installing a new well pump as Bashir annoyingly prattles on about his descendant, the Doctor. And before Julian can start in on Miles about Rita Tannenbaum, the Chief curtly declares, "I have a wife and kids back home." On a remote grassy hilltop, Kira finishes praying over her own grave, as Odo remarks that the prophets, if listening, might be very confused. Kira believes that everyone has one destiny, one path, and now technology is being used to change that. But Odo supports Yedrin's plan, because not only will it preserve this new timeline, it's the only way to save Kira and give the other Odo a chance at happiness. However, Jadzia has discovered something disturbing. As she shows her pad secretly to Benjamin, she's discovered that Yedrin's plan won't work, and that the accident and all that unfolded afterward will happen again, as it did 200 years ago, including Kira's death. Act 3. In the meeting hall, Jadzia stares at Yedrin intently and accusingly, reeling in the disbelief that the Dax symbiote betrayed her. But Yedrin Dax stands firm and believes that the 8,000 people who exist in the here and now, because of an accident 200 years ago, have the right to fight for their existence as much as the 48 crewmen aboard the Defiant, who are and will be their ancestors. But Sisko reminds Yedrin that this isn't about the philosophy of who lives and who dies, and certainly not open for interpretation when it comes to Kira's life versus the lives of the 8,000 who exist now. But Yedrin is ready to make that call, and he has been ready for 200 years, ever since Jadzia insisted that the Defiant investigate the planet and make this huge scientific discovery. And because of her rash decision, Dax has harbored the regret of what happened to Kira and to all of her friends for 200 years. Benjamin sympathizes with his old friend, but stands firm in his decision to return his crew to their own timeline and back to their families. As Kira and Worf watch several children play catch with each other, knowing that their destinies are about to change, Worf tells her not to blame herself, as they are all choosing to leave this planet for their own personal reasons. Young Gabriel walks amidst the village elders, feeling that something is amiss, as it is unusually quiet. Meanwhile, Worf is sitting next to a fire when the Sons of Moog appear and explain to Worf how they have followed the Warrior's Code, so much so that they cannot bear to die a dishonorable death, one that will prevent them entrance into Stovacor. They offer their lives and their weapons to Worf, so that he may grant them an honorable death. But today is not a good day to die, for them, as Worf will comfort them tomorrow. Odo finds Kira back at the other Kira's gravesite, who has come to a decision. The path of her prophets led her to this time, to this point, and in order to save 8,000 innocent lives, Kira is ready to sacrifice her own to history. Act 4. In the Defiant's mess hall, Captain Sisko and his command crew are all stunned at Kira's decision. Julia insists that she must receive the proper medical treatment on Deep Space Nine or she will die. Dax reminds everyone that as soon as they leave the planet, 8,000 people will cease to exist. However, Kira decides to let the will of the prophets choose her fate. But the chief staunchly objects to her beliefs and would rather take his chances cheating fate and getting back to Keiko and Molly. The discussion reaches a point of boiling over as Captain Sisko, after hearing what everyone had to say, turns to Kira, while telling all of them he's not even considering letting her sacrifice herself. Later in the town square, Jadzia and Worf are reflecting on what will become of their descendants. Meeting up with Captain Sisko, who is also taking one last look around, they are all surprised as Gabriel, the young boy, comes barreling through them from behind. He tells Sisko that it's planting time, and he's running to the fields. Shortly after, Sisko, Worf, and Jadzia bump into Yedrin, who explains to them that planting day brings everyone together and must be seen through, even on this day, the day that will change everything. As the Defiant's crew and the settlers are hard at work plowing, fertilizing and planting, and watering, Miles delivers Sisko a status report. His descendant, Molly, who is working nearby, shames the chief into rolling up his sleeves and getting his hands dirty. She's an O'Brien, all right. The farming joviality subsides for a moment as Worf escorts the Sons of Moog to what they thought would be a battlefield to fight a common enemy. Worf says that the settlers are trying to plant their fields before the sun sets and that time is their enemy. Lessons learned and metaphors understood, the Sons of Moog add their strength to the fight. As the chief helps Molly with her planting, he tells her that he has a daughter with the same name. And when she asks if he should meet her, something changes in the chief as he stands up, strides over to the captain, and tells him, "We can't let these people die." Act 5. As the planting ceremony comes to an end, Sisko and Jadzia stand firm with their decision to recreate the accident that stranded them on Gaia 200 years ago, causing Kira's death in the process. Yedrin gives Jadzia a pad of the original navigation charts to download into the Defiant's autopilot, sending her to the right point in time. Before they leave, Benjamin hugs his old friend one last time. On the Defiant, Odo is adamant that Kira returns to Deep Space Nine, but Kira pleads with him, telling Odo that what she is doing is for the innocent 8,000 people who will die if she doesn't. And before they part, Odo asks that if Kira knew about his feelings years ago, would she do things differently? Kira responds only with a longing maybe and a tearful kiss goodbye. On the bridge, all is ready for launch, including a probe containing crew messages for their families to explain what happened. With the probe launched, the Defiant speeds towards the quantum barrier and the coordinates that will send them 200 years in the past. Dax activates the autopilot and all is going according to plan. Suddenly, to everyone's surprise, especially O'Brien's, the Defiant veers away from the anomaly at the last second, breaching the quantum barrier and changing history, as Kira's scanners show no sign of the settlement or the inhabitants, everything is gone. Later on the Defiant, Sisko and Dax are walking down a corridor trying to figure out what happened. Only someone who used to be a part of the crew could have bypassed the right security systems to sabotage the autopilot. Someone like Dax. Someone like Yedrin Dax. But the two old friends take comfort in the fact that the settlers will always live on, as long as they are remembered. Later, in her quarters, Odo visits with a visibly distraught Major Kira, confessing to her that he and the other Odo linked for a time. And now this Odo knows everything, for better or worse. And the one thing that Odo from the colony wanted Kira to know is that he was the one who changed the Defiant's flight plan so that she wouldn't have to die. Kira raged at the Odo standing before her, who tells her that the other Odo did it simply out of love for her. And as Kira demands to know if that makes it right, Odo replies that he doesn't know, but the other Odo thought so. The end.
No, right. I just wanted to let you know that I got a message from the John of the future to tell me, John of now, to tell you that you did a good job on the recap. So, yeah.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate that, John of the future. And
sure.
John
Hey,
of the
I'll
present.
let him know when I get there. I will see him. I'm traveling through time at the speed of time. So,
We don't
we
have
don't.
the time. What was I saying? I love that joke with
Yes.
Troy. And then he gave me a shot of something called tequila. You know that it was a complex breakdown to write, primarily because I don't think that I've ever had to watch a 5-minute and 24-second cold open before.
So it's not the longest cold open in DS9 history, but it feels that way, and I'm always surprised when I'm watching it and I'm getting into it, and then you cut to credits, and I was like, wait, I thought we already did that. We didn't do that? We're still
Right.
in the cold open? Oh, okay, because I thought we were firmly into Act 1.
Right. I think that they probably could have cut it where Yedrin Dax says, "We're your descendants," and then would go into like the
Right.
opening music.
Right.
But it was just weird that it kept going. I'm like, oh
Yeah.
man, this prologue write up is going to be so long.
Well, it's one of those. It's one of those things with an episode that is very concept-based and plot-based as opposed to just characters going through a thing. Yes, there's a heavy character element to this, and we will get into that in our discussion. But as sci-fi often does, then you marry that to that sort of very complex plot situation going on here. So, right at the top, we learned that there is no more Kira and Shakar. Aw. But, I mean, they just asked the prophets, and how did they get an answer? And what if they disagree with the answer? Like, they both decide, like, we should go after the prophets if we should stick together. Show us a sign, prophets. Oh, they told you yes? Oh, because they told me no. No, trust me,
Right.
really, they said no.
I don't know why I didn't see this before, but it's just when you said this. And I know that we were talking shipping before in a previous conversation, so I apologize to the listeners now if you don't get this reference. But why did we not ship these two as Shakira?
Oh, man. Oh, come on. Yeah.
Right?
That's so perfect.
You're
Okay,
welcome out
yeah.
there, by the way. if
Shakira.
you're
Go
laughing
make it
right
a
now.
hashtag Shakira. Make it a thing.
It's right there. How did we not see that before?
We're only, 20 plus years too late, but that's okay. We can make it a thing now.
Duncan Reguera's hips don't lie. That's all I'm saying.
That's true. That's true. Yeah. And apparently that was part of the not his hips, but Duncan's availability schedule, etc. That they just couldn't keep getting him back. And Ira said at some point that he felt like by elevating him so quickly, by putting him in this relationship with Kira and making him the prime minister, I can't remember the title exactly, by putting him into those places so fast, it's like, where do you go with that character then?
First minister of the
There
provisional
you
government.
Go. Good.
Yeah.
Put that on your business card.
Right.
It was funny to me, right at the beginning, that Sisko, where the guy's walking through with the coffee or the Aractogeno, no thanks, I'm trying to cut down. It was funny to me. First of all, I don't get it because I figure, like, look, if you've got a caffeine problem or whatever, that's probably something that Dr. Bashir could take care of right away. If they got synthahol in the future, right, you probably have a way to counteract caffeine if you need to. But
Would that be synthephene?
Yeah, we'll make that a thing too.
It's trademarked, by the way.
Exactly.
Trademark that.
But it was funny to me that stood out because it was such a 20th century thing. It was such a 20th century line, and it really just kind of sounds like a joke. So I wondered if it was ad lib. Of course, you have to have that come back because that has to be something so specific that Yedrin Dax refers to. But it sticks out like a sore thumb, not only because it's such a sort of a colloquial thing, but then it also becomes a colloquial thing that gets turned into a plot point. So it's like it's something Sisko would have never said before, will never say again, but he has to say it in this episode so you can have the reference to it.
Right, so that Yedrin Dax anchors the scene in the future to the past.
Yeah,
for sure.
And wow, hey, Miles and Rita making a new life. I thought that was very interesting. And I kind of like to see the Chief squirm there for a bit. That was...
Oh, he squirmed a couple times in this episode, I think.
That was fun.
Yeah.
I
also thought that having Quark in there teaching math, that was brilliant. Also a brilliant way to add somebody in for contractual obligation.
Yes. Absolutely. That's what I thought too. And it was just like, yeah, hey, if you're going to do it, that's the perfect way to do it. I thought it interesting that they were still calling Worf son of Moog. And because I thought he was a Martok now. He's in the Martok family. There is no more House of Moog. But
yeah, I was thinking of that too. And since he's the only Klingon in the crash, maybe he was thinking, like, I have to preserve my family name if we're going to continue on. I'm the last of the son of Moog, the sons of Moog. As far as he's concerned, he was the only son of Moog, so why not continue that family line? I'm sorry, Klingon fans. That was a really low blow dig. I apologize. It was just there.
Hey, he had a great one-liner. Again, is it true you can kill somebody just by looking at them? Only when I'm angry. Perfect.
That was good.
Perfect.
Right?
Worfism right there. I was trying to do a little bit of math, because particularly when we're talking about the Chief, that's 7 generations in 200 years, which I guess works out. That should be reasonable, within the realm of reason. And they went from 48 people to 8,000 people in 200 years. And I'm going to say Worf was busy. Bashir apparently was busy. The Chief and they were all busy. They were all very busy for those first few generations, at least.
Well, maybe that's why planting day is so important. Maybe there's something in the soil.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, maybe that's it. Yeah.
I always wanted to hear something about because we've always done this in Star Trek where there's something in the atmosphere or in the soil or something that allowed them to thrive and prosper and not worry about disease or violent predators or things of that nature. Like, this is like the most beautiful, bountiful planet. There's a reason why we're here. There's a reason why we have to protect this colony, because by all intents and purposes, it's like this colony is like Wakanda, right?
Yeah.
It's like the Wakanda of the Star Trek universe. Like, everything great happens here because you crash landed.
Right. Exactly.
Right. Something that the Defiant irradiated the soil, or there was no such thing as antimatter introduced into this part of the galaxy ever. So now it created super soil or super atmosphere. Right. Something. Yeah. That's my TED talk for the day. Just add super to everything.
It works. Yeah.
The people in the background, the really, really, really older actors. There was one guy who had fantastic white hair pulled back into a ponytail.
Yeah.
So he must have been, say, in Star Trek terms, maybe in his 80s or 90s, which means he's almost close to being half middle age, because 150 or something like that is the human age. He must have been there for maybe say when Worf passed, because Klingons age.
They live longer. Yeah.
So it would have been cool if a really, really old dude with semi-Klingon features was one of the sons of Moog, him.
That could have been cool.
All grizzled out, Yeah, that would have been neat. And speaking of, revering your elders, I do love how Sisko still calls Dax old man.
It's a nice little bit of continuity. And, I didn't really even get into it. I didn't take any further notes on it, but one thing that did pop into my head was this whole complex issue of, well, now you actually have two Dax symbionts, which are the same being, presumably with the same consciousness, in the same place. So it's sort of like, the transporter problem. If you are creating a duplicate, which one is the quote-unquote real one? And here you've got Dax, full of the same memories, full of the same experiences, but now with a new one that has diverged off of that. I mean, Kira almost has it okay that the only other version of her is in the ground. So, she doesn't have to deal quite with that quandary of, existential worry. But speaking of Kira, I got to say, she's actually keeping it together pretty well for a woman who knows that she's going to die, at least one version of her, and can go actually visit her own grave. I would think that would send a lesser person or a more emotionally vulnerable person right into a tailspin.
Yeah. I thought that was probably something that the writers were really high-fiving themselves about, because, what about this idea? Oh, my God, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And it is. It's something that you don't see a lot of or maybe never see, in one of your favorite series where somebody is actually standing atop of their own grave and praying for themselves. Yeah. That was really, and of course, Odo saying the prophet's got to be confused on this one. That was a nice touch, just to add a little bit of levity to the scene.
I love this look on Odo. The hair, the face, he's Odo casual now. And I was very interested to read that they actually just used the prosthetic that they had created, or they used the mold for the prosthetic when Odo was Curzon. So you remember, okay. So they didn't have to redesign the makeup. They just gave him that look, and that lightened him up, and it was wonderful. Yeah.
And a little bit of wave in his hair, so his hair wasn't so, perfectly, changeling, not
great.
Solid.
Such a great look on him.
Yeah. And it gave him the ability to act more through
for real. And, oh, man, I am so glad that O'Brien called out Worf. You hardly ever see your son.
Oh, my God. So much shade. So much shade.
Yes. I live for that.
I mean, that's it got tense in that scene, because first of all, O'Brien's I don't care about your gods. Your gods are your gods. You can believe whatever you want. I want to get back to my family, so don't speak for me. I thought that was so real. The chief always keeps it real when it comes to that stuff, right?
Yeah. So
I love
good.
that too.
And, on kind of a contemplative note, I love that they had this line, they existed as long as we remember them, they always will. Made me think a bit of the end of Wrath of Khan,
Yeah. Yeah, that's actually a really good way to frame that. And because the Trill, by and large are immortal, if their hosts if their hosts can live on and healthily and host the Trill symbiote, the memories of those 8,000 people, obviously you didn't need all of them, but so the memories of the people that Jadzia was able to interact with will live on forever.
This episode confirms what I always suspected, that the DS9 crew is outstanding in their field.
We'll get back to Children of Time in just a moment, but first a word from Eagle Moss and the Orville Starships collection.
The Orville what?
Well, I know. Wait, we're still doing Star Trek on this, right?
We absolutely are.
Okay.
And we're just taking a small pause for our advertiser identification because Eagle Moss is very well known for the quality of their Starship collection for Star Trek, but now developed in partnership with Seth MacFarlane and his hit science fiction comedy drama, they are now releasing the ships, the brand new Orville official ships collection, and available only from Eagle Moss Hero Collector. Now, the first ships in this collection are the Planetary Union ship, the USS Orville, the ECV-197, and its shuttle, the very statuesque and well-sculpted ECV 197-1. And they're available right now directly from the Eagle Moss shop for only $29.95 each with free shipping. There's even an oversized XL edition of the Orville available for only $74.95. No matter what you order, use code MISSION10 at checkout to get 10% off your entire purchase.
No, wait, I have to pause here for just a second because you actually have both. You have the small version and the large version of the Orville, correct?
I do indeed.
Yeah, and the details are amazing, and you love them. Of course, those details are great because they're based on a careful study of the models created for use in the series. So these highly detailed ships are made of die-cast metal and high-quality ABS materials, then hand-painted for stunning accuracy. Each ship comes with a display base, plus a collector's magazine filled with concept art, interviews, and behind-the-scenes details of the Orville TV series. And don't fret, yes, there are those 3 now, but additional ships are slated to join the collection soon. But these are the ones that you want to get right now while you can.
And we are in the season, so if you're looking for that special something for that special collector in your life, this is what you should do. Check out herocollector.com/The Orville because full details, including comprehensive views of each ship and ordering information, can be found at that website, herocollector.com/Orville. Use code MISSION10 at checkout to get 10% off your entire purchase.
All right, right off the top, Norman, I got to say, with Children of Time, I love a sci-fi premise like this. To me, it just feels sort of perfect that it's at home in a vintage pulp novel. It would be at home in TOS, and it's absolutely at home right here on DS9. It's one of those stories that just sort of is an evergreen. It fits wherever you want to park it. And that's a good thing. You know, it means that it's malleable. It's sort of, it's about the ideas and isn't specifically dependent on those characters, though these characters that we've come to know and love certainly bring it to life. And listeners probably already know, since they've heard me over the years say that I really dig a good time travel story. Just if you're going to do it, make it fresh, make it unique, bring human drama to it, bring some emotional drama to it, and then use that time travel trope sparingly. Don't make it a thing that you can do every week just when you feel like it. So right off the bat, I feel like this is a story that's starting off with a strong premise. It's really going to bring me into the ideas here. So let's talk about some of those ideas within that show.
Well, I love a good time travel story also, and I think one of the things, John, that I struggle with time travel episodes is the amount of time travel series that have come between when this was originally released, and I did not see this in 1997 when it was originally released, so that you're competing now, or at least I'm competing now, with having seen so many time travel style shows that sometimes, at least for my experience, sometimes you get a little caught in the weeds about time travel specifics. And in this case, we always see time travel from one fixed point in time. That would be our fixed point in time and our protagonist's fixed point in time. And that's the compass that we are guided by. But then timelines change and narrative perspectives change. And how does that impact what we believe to be true when we're watching this episode, and why? Case in point here, I want to talk about the divergence of the timelines when the Defiant crashed. So when the Defiant crashed on Gaia, or Gaia, however you want to pronounce it, there was no life on that planet until they crashed, then they tried to escape, then they got flung back 200 years, and then created that colony.
Right.
So does that mean that the life on that planet that now exists is only because of an accident?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I will say yes to that. Yeah, I think that's the only way we can look at it. And then what's interesting there is that if that planet is sort of surrounded by, protected by this temporal distortion, is that truly having any effect on what's happening on the outside?
So I think everything is, that's the thing is with a time travel story like this, the emotional narrative is literally encapsulated within the sphere of this particular world. Mm-hmm. And then they leave the planet, and the history has been set back to zero because of what Odo... I like how you say Odo Casual, because of what Odo Casual did.
He is Odo Casual, yeah.
But if that were the case, then those memories that Sisko and Dax were talking about at the end should not exist either. That is where I get caught up in the weeds with time travel stories, because if everything's reset, then that actual accident never happened. And they should be going along their merry way. But I'm glad that they're telling this story, because I want those lives to mean something. I want those 8,000 people to live on in someone's memory, because they deserve to. They lived, as far as they know, a life of real existence.
They should be, in your thought, they should be going along their merry way with no memory of any of that having happened at all. Sort of it's Back to the Future. They're disappearing from the photograph, wiped out of time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But I think we have to assume that planet, whatever mechanics of the way that time distortion happens around that planet, it's sort of protected in that respect. Boy, wouldn't it be terrible if like a bunch of other ships keep showing up and doing the same thing, and like, Gul Dukat shows up, and then 200 years later there's a Cardassian colony, but we got to wipe you out because we got to leave, and then some other ship shows up and there's a bunch of Wayuns running around, and then even 200 years later.
But that kind of, you make a good point of that. That's one of those types of Talos 4 style warning buoys, like, please do not approach the planet, on pain of General Order 4.
Yes.
Right?
Stay out of here.
Stay out of here.
Yeah, right. The thing, though, this show really brings up is that there's all this relationship drama going on. We start out with the news that Kira has broken up with Shakar. And then we have Odo right away trying to hide his feelings, though come on, they all knew. Like, I felt, reading the background of this episode, I felt like this was an interesting thing, where Gary Holland had said, going way back, that he had assumed early on Odo reacting to the idea that Kira had a relationship with Vedic Bareil, that he was sort of pushing down his own feelings of jealousy, sadness, disappointment that he wouldn't get to have a relationship with Kira. Whereas the writer said, like, no, that wasn't really necessarily the intention. He was just having a reaction. But to Gary's point, and to a lot of viewers' point, they felt like, no, there's something else going on here. And then hints of that kept dropping further out. And then when you get to Heart of Stone, when you've got a founder, a changeling pretending to be Kira, trapped in that stone, that sort of stalagmite growing up, and he pours his guts out, but it's not her. So now, finally, after years, there's this kind of payoff here, and you've got future Odo, casual Odo, just coming up and blurting it right out.
Oh, I love that. I'm so sorry to laugh there, but it's so good. I love that.
No. Well, I wonder, like, is this a sign of emotional maturity? I mean, I think the show is basically saying that it is, that Odo has gone through a tremendous amount of emotional growth. And is that just a sign of emotional growth, emotional maturity? Is it he feels the freedom to be able to say what's on his mind, to just be able to be himself and let somebody know his true feelings, as opposed to it being all wrapped up in him not being sure of himself and not sure what the answer will be, and can he actually deal with a negative answer if that's what he would get.
I mean, there is a little bit of a safety net here when it comes to, again, time travel stories, because it's not Odo, it's not our protagonist's timeline of Odo that we're seeing in this particular instance. It is casual Odo, who has learned from all of his experience, who has learned from the loss of Kira that it's better to have told her and suffered that than not have told her at all and suffer for 200 years. So the person that she is seeing isn't the Odo that she knows.
Yeah.
So how, I guess, and I'm going to get to this a little bit later, but it's not really earned in that same sense. That emotional connection is a fantasy in a way because this Odo doesn't technically exist in her timeline if that timeline is restored.
Right.
So with all things, and especially let's just kind of cross the fandom streams here. Let's go to Jurassic Park. The way that Ian Malcolm used the rivulet of water and how it changed patterns on Ellie's hand is because time, like currents, don't move that way. They don't move in the exact same form or the exact same direction.
Right.
Neither would Odo.
It is
neither would his choices.
Yeah. It is a little unfair because casual Odo has nothing to lose. You know? He's messing with somebody else's life at that point. I do want to mention some of the other characters. Bashir is just, he's beside himself. Like, wow, I had this relationship. We had a bunch of kids. All right, cool. But the conflict within Chief O'Brien is really interesting. I think. Look, Keiko became kind of a running joke, particularly on Mission Log, and I feel like with a lot of fans, too. I think maybe if we had seen more of Keiko, and if we really bought into their relationship, which I don't, I would buy this conflict more, and I would be more sympathetic to it. In this case, the way it's played out here, I wish that the expression of that conflict was a little more thoughtful and a little more forgiving of himself, because it's okay for Miles to consider the possibility that he won't be with Keiko forever. Probably won't happen in any timeline, I'm going to say, but it's okay. It's okay. And it's okay for him to find another woman attractive, regardless of what's going on. It's okay for him to have that human response. I get it. He's probably the longest consistently running relationship that we've had on DS9, if not Star Trek in general at this point.
Is that foregoing Kirk and the Enterprise?
Yeah, well, that is a love affair that will never die. But I just feel like it was a bit of a squandered moment because Keiko's always gone. Oh, she's 6 months on Bajor. Look, I know we just had a kid, but she's going to be gone visiting her mother. There's a lot of that just gets thrown away. And it would have had more emotional impact, a little more reality, if there was a little more investment in that relationship. But with that said, I'm glad that they approached it. I just feel like there also needed to be, there's a little bit of that acknowledgement from Bashir, but Bashir is trying to be, the space playboy that he is. There just needed to be a little bit of a little more gentle reassurance to Chief O'Brien, like, hey, it's all right. It's all right that, if we don't come out of this, there is also a future for that O'Brien.
Sure. And that O'Brien lineage. And as the paternal force, of the O'Brien lineage.
Yeah. Sure.
That's something that's obviously important to him. And I think that it would have been couched nicely if Julian said that, hey, you know what? I never had a relationship like yours. I'm glad that my bloodline and my family name has lived on throughout the 200 years.
Yeah.
But for you, Miles, I'm like, if Keiko was with us, it's very well possible that she also could have died on this crash landing, and you would have to move on. She would want you to move on. She would want you to be happy. And not torture yourself by not being with her, because it's not your choice. What happened to her wasn't because of what you did,
right,
or what you chose to do. And
right.
Ostensibly that's what Dax is saying. Like, these people didn't choose this life. It was my choice, my pride that forced these people into this situation.
Yeah.
But talking about say Rita Tannenbaum or the woman that Bashir married. Mm-hmm. What happens now, since they have all that knowledge and they're going back, leaving the planet, going back to Deep Space Nine, knowing that they do have or will have at one point in time romantic interests planted in their heads now because of what they experienced on the planet.
Yes.
Right?
That is...
So, Miles goes, Rita Tannenbaum, she's just an ensign. Well, what would I know about her? She only serves on the Defiant. Well, now it's in his head.
Yes. Exactly.
It didn't leave because they left the subspace barrier or the quantum barrier. It's all there still.
Right.
and are also all of the fantasy possibilities of what could happen, much like what he did with Kira on the shuttle.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Right?
Yeah, they both had the good sense to say no, but this is a different thing. Now there's actually a glimpse at a relationship. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that'll mess with somebody's head.
That goes part and parcel with some of like the weeds I say that I've been getting caught up with this time travel episode, is that it doesn't reset the timeline. It is just a blip of the timeline that they still can remember.
Right. Yeah, that's true. It just look, Chief, when you get back, don't mention any of this to Keiko. Okay, just don't. As far as she knows, you went to the Gamma Quadrant, you looked at stuff, you came back, you're done. Nothing to report there. I do love that the Klingons in this, the Klingon-ish people who have grown up in the last 200 years, are trying so hard to be Klingon, and they look to the guy who is trying so hard to be Klingon. Like, there's something so charmingly misguided about that, but it sort of defines who the Klingons are. Like, these are people who are just constantly trying to live up to this idea of what being Klingon is, and that is a goalpost that keeps moving all the time. Mm-hmm. So there was something comedic yet really heartfelt about it too.
I love the fact that Klingon, quote unquote Klingon, on Gaia isn't just about biological identity. It's a cultural identity now.
Yes, yeah.
Which I think is really, really neat. It's See, Worf is the only Klingon on the Defiant. He's the only Klingon, as far as I know, serving in Starfleet.
Yeah.
So it's his bloodline that has to move forward. It's his heritage that has to move on. And I think that's neat that the Sons of Moog, they adopted whatever philosophy that he was able to pass down throughout the generations and still maintain, either by blood or by choice, this Klingon heritage. I found that charming just because it is something cultural that was part of that Defiant's crew that crash landed.
Yeah. And let's be real here. There are Klingons who are part Klingon, part human, I guess, and then you've got Yedrin Dax, so you've got somebody who is Trill but not Klingon. So definitely between Worf and Dax, who crash landed on that planet 200 years ago, there was a lot of other stuff going on other than just Klingon and Trill bloodlines mixing.
Oh, sure.
Oh, yeah. There definitely was.
Remember, 8,000 people in 200 years.
Yeah.
It wasn't just in the water.
Yeah, we saw a lot of variation among them, yeah. We did mention a little bit, just talking about that interesting moment with Casual, Odo, and Kira next to Kira's grave. She has this interesting line where she's conflicted about using technology to change the will of the prophets. And we've talked about the problem with saying something like that before, because, again, this very thing could be the will of the prophets anyway. To go through this test and then use technology to get yourself out of it to correct, quote unquote, the timeline again, could that just be the will of the prophets as well? I mean, technology is technology. Was the first Bajoran who took an aspirin going against the will of the prophets? That's an impossible thing to answer. Therefore, it's sort of a non sequitur to even ask it, to even pose it at a certain point.
Well, I mean, a lot of religious philosophies, that is a very a prevalent part of the belief system, is that everything has transpired by the will of X, and X means your specific deity. So if God wills it, or the prophet wills it, or everything that has led up to this moment was part of a master divine plan,
right,
then yes, whatever happened here on this planet was part of that master divine plan. Now, you add in the agnostic component to this whole equation, which is, say, like a Chief O'Brien or an Odo, because they don't believe in these divine plans. So it's plausible that that someone like an Odo would change the course of Kira's fate, because he doesn't believe what Kira believes. He believes what he believes. He believes that she should live. Kira believes that she should die.
Right. But you just keep taking that ad infinitum, and you just say, okay, well, Odo's opinion is the will of the prophets. And Odo,
Right.
There's simply no way out of that line of argument, because no matter what happens, you could just say, well, that was the plan of the prophets. It was their will. Can't argue.
And
Yeah.
that goes all the way back to, say, what Dan Brown is most famous for with what came first, the antimatter particle or God. So it's one can't exist without the other. One created the other, or one perpetuates the other. And you're right, an ad infinitum argument that only can be, only can dig in your heels further, depending on what side of the theological equation that you stand on.
Right.
But it does lend itself towards really good storytelling. And when it comes to technology and death, it's something that Star Trek is not a stranger to.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, like Kirk said in Star Trek 2, I've cheated death, I've tricked my way out of death, and I've patted myself on the back for my ingenuity.
Yeah.
That's...
Yeah.
And he used technology most of the time to do that, i.e. via the Enterprise or the people that surrounded him, especially Spock.
Yeah.
Right? Or
Right.
Dr. McCoy in varying degrees.
Right.
So it's not about, but then you can say like, well, it's the will of the prophets, because I'm sure the prophets existed in those times too, that Kirk was supposed to live. Or it's the will of some deity that he was supposed to live.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, okay, then look, then you've got a contrast here. You've got Kira telling Miles, oh, God, this just it made my skin crawl. Your family will be fine, Miles. The prophets will take care of them. And I was, whoa, Kira, you do not get to invoke your religion to tell someone that he can't see his family again, or sort of work through the process of trying to piece back together the life that he had. That was. I guess the best thing that I can say about that scene is it is incredible how thoughtful and maybe accepting of other people's arguments they were, because to me, that kind of thing, that's when chairs start flying. I mean, that was, yeah.
Well, I think that probably in maybe the original series or the Next Generation, there could have been you have a point. You have a point about that.
Right.
But what I do love about it in Deep Space Nine is that Miles is like, you don't get to speak for me like that.
Yeah.
Your belief systems aren't mine. I respect your belief systems, but you have to respect mine. And you just can't blanket say that, everyone's going to be fine. Whoever you care about, they'll be fine. They'll live on. You don't know that.
Right.
And you can't say that because my gods believe that they will be, it's going to be so. And I love how Miles threw that back at her. He's like, no, that's not how this works.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? And I'm glad that he was able to speak his mind to an authority figure like that, because he's like, you know what? When it all comes down to it, I don't care about my job. I don't care about my rank. I don't care about my privilege. I care about my family.
Mm-hmm.
I care about the people that I love that need me. I'll be fine without Starfleet, but they won't be fine without me.
Exactly. Yeah, she does not get to make that call. All right, so who's right? 49 people who want to go home, or the 8,000 people who want to keep living on this planet? I mean, this is the ultimate expression of the trolley problem. And we've presented the trolley problem on the show before, but now you're really raising the stakes of the trolley problem, because originally the idea is, okay, you're standing at the cross switch and you can either throw the switch and that trolley will kill 5 people, or you don't throw the switch and the trolley will kill 1 person. Oh, but wait, that 1 person is your mom or your brother or your child or whatever. Now we've just extrapolated that to this crazy extreme where it's 8,000 people who are all your great-great-great-great-grandchildren. This is a culture that you built, as opposed to your immediate crew who you're trying to get home. And, let's not forget, we don't know the outcome for all those people who are still at DS9. We don't know what their futures, what their lives would be like. I'm actually kind of surprised that Cisco has less to say about this than he does, because he's got this great relationship with Jake. I mean, he does. Yeah, he he's got a good moment when he's sitting there after that meeting scene, just saying like, "Yeah, I made up my mind. Here's what we're doing." But I I keep waiting for something about Jake specifically to come up here.
I'm so surprised that in that decision where he says that we're not going to entertain what Kira's saying, we are going to, to save your life against your own wishes. But I'm surprised that there isn't something along the lines of Sisko looking at a pad. Maybe it was a story that Jake was writing that he gave to him for that long trip.
Yes.
And he just goes, I'm sorry, Jaco, but this is the right thing to do. I know that you'd forgive me for this. Something.
Yeah.
Right? That says that the sacrifice that he's about to make is important. It means that the 8,000 lives aren't just this tangential circumstance from a temporal effect. Right. These people are real. These people have lives. And the Sisko lineage was in his hands.
Yes.
That baby was part of his heritage, his descendant. So he would be looking at that baby and like, I'm sorry, Jake, I don't know what's going to happen in the future. I just know what's going to happen in the here and now if I don't do this.
Yeah.
And they never went there. And I really wanted him to do that, like The Visitor.
Yeah.
I really wanted him to go there that way.
Yeah.
Odo didn't just become casual in a day. At one point he was probably just casual Friday Odo.
So, John, it is time to talk about the morals and meanings and messages of the children of time, and we will make the time to understand how important time is to this episode. How did this land for you?
This episode, it's sci-fi soap opera at its finest, and I'm totally on board for that. I feel like people could use that phrase for DS9 in particular, that it's sort of a soap opera. This is a series that spends more time building up relationships and these long character threads and arcs than the series that preceded it. Some people could use that as pejorative. I don't think so. I think it adds to my attachment to these characters. It adds to my interest in their lives. So when you take a story like this and you marry a hard sci-fi concept like time travel to these human emotional concerns, I think you have a recipe for a successful story here. I do like that the whole question about Odo's feelings for Kira got us here, because again, it's little hints that are dropped throughout earlier episodes, some intentional, some not. And then you go, okay, well, wait, what happens if we really explore that? And the way we're going to explore it is time travel, so we can take this character, accelerate him a couple hundred years, and see what that does to his feelings, to his emotions. So yeah, they had teased it before, and I'm glad that we let Odo have a relationship with an exceptional woman before we got to this point with Kira. If you think back to A Simple Investigation, which was not that long ago, we really got to grow Odo. And by doing that, it rounded him out a little bit more, made him less pathetic, to be honest, to find a word for that. Because if it was just the same sort of emotionally stunted Odo, then I think we would have a lot harder time buying that he would actually be able to pursue something with Kira. We're just allowing casual Odo to come in and sort of have his influence here. I said it before, I love that scene in the Defiant where the crew are making their cases to Captain Sisko about who wants to stay and who wants to go and why. There's nothing really remarkable about that scene. It's a very like a TNG thing. People sitting around the table talking about their opinions, their feelings on this. But it's just so right. Just hearing these people say what they need to, seeing Benjamin weigh it out, and then hearing his decision as the commander. It's just a solid, great scene. And in this episode, Renee, we've said, is just freaking marvelous. He's so good in it. So, yeah, this is one of those... I would honestly say this episode might stay within the top 5 or top 10 of DS9 for me. It works so well as a standalone, but it also works so well as an episode that pays off a lot of the relationships we've built with these characters up until now. So it works on both of those levels. And again, it's just that perfect combination for me of hard sci-fi meeting the human element, the emotional element. So I loved it. Absolutely loved it. What about you?
So do you remember that scene where Kira gets hit by the energy pulse?
How could I forget? Well, the thing that we're missing is a Chekhov scream.
And she turns into two versions of a quantum state?
Yeah.
I'm the other version of the quantum state.
Okay.
Here, John.
All right. Talk to me.
And not negatively so, but there are times when I think that that time travel stories do a fantastic job for the most part, and I think that this is one of those times. But because one of my favorite fandoms in the world is a time travel fandom, that's Doctor Who, and I've been watching it since the late 1970s with John Pertwee and Tom Baker. And then one of my all-time favorite television shows that a lot of people have probably never watched before, but it's a Canadian show called Continuum starring Rachel Nichols. A fabulous, fabulous time travel show. Time travel stories for me, I always end up probably unfairly nitpicking pretty hard.
Okay.
And it comes to the butterfly effects. It comes to the butterfly effects of the story. And in this case, all of the different ways that chaos theory can apply itself to not being able to rectify temporal mechanics.
Right.
In this case, it's what the information that, say, Bashir has for future relationships, how Miles now feels about this ensign, how casual Odo has given formal Odo.
Yeah.
All of this information that will affect his present and therefore his future. That will not change. And now Odo, formal Odo, knows everything about how casual Odo has felt and what he has done with those feelings for over 200 years.
Yeah.
How do you separate yourself from that? And being a changeling, he linked with him. It's not like he wrote it down in a diary.
Yeah.
His whole emotional being has been transferred into Odo in a way that casual Odo now lives in a part of formal Odo.
Yeah.
So everything that he does now in his relationship with Kira is now informed by what casual Odo has taught him to do, has warned him to do.
Yeah.
And that in and of itself affects the timeline.
It does. It absolutely does. Yeah.
It's essentially, I hate to say it, and I hate to be as crass about it as the sports almanac from Back to the Future, but it's literally casual Odo was Biff. The sports almanac was linking with young Biff.
Right.
And it was young Biff altering the future timeline based on what he knew to bet on.
Right.
That is what's happening here in the most vulgar way of interpreting that part of the narrative.
It is. Now, we're glad that Odo has a sense of morality and justice that Biff definitely does not.
True.
True.
That's why I say it's vulgar.
Yes, yeah. But, I sort of, I don't want to jump ahead. Well, here, you finish your thoughts, because I'm going to pick up on that for the morals, meanings, messages.
Well, I mean, that's just what I pick up on. And that's, like I said, in time travel stories, it's not necessarily the main story, of which I think is beautifully told and beautifully acted, especially by Renee's part in it as casual Odo. By the way, casual Odo and Gui Bashir got to have some kind of, buddy cop comedy.
We're a band, like a cartoon band from an early 70s Saturday morning cartoon. Like, that just sounds so right. Yeah.
There are a lot of creative people out there. Do us a favor. See what you can come up with.
Exactly.
That's already been trademarked. Call us for the license. But I sometimes I said, and it's my own fault, I'll own up to it. I'll be the first person to critique myself for it. But I do kind of hold time travel episodes to a fairly critical threshold.
Yeah.
Not in that way. Not in that threshold way, people. It's not that threshold. But it's like I was pretty harsh about Trials and Tribulations.
Yes, you sure were. Yeah, for good reason.
Because of the Klingon timeline issue. So as much as I love this episode a lot, those are the things that still stick with me, because I want to know what's going to happen with that forbearance of the future.
Yeah. Well, so here's what I'm going to do. I fully appreciate and respect where you're coming from with the downside of this kind of timeline meddling. I get where you're coming from. I'm going to go a little different direction for the morals, meanings, messages. Because I'm going to take it back to this idea that we have said on Mission Log before, which is, okay, these things aren't real, can't actually travel in time, can't actually, give warning to somebody to then change the timeline and change their future. So what actually is the value in telling a story like this? Because that story is being told by contemporary people to a contemporary audience to hopefully land emotionally, philosophically for them to think and to contemplate something. And there's a great thread in this episode with all the relationship stuff that's going on. We get to see, the chief's sort of unease and guilt. We get to see, how people have carried on, how people have passed along their heritage to their children and then their children and their children. I'm going to give Odo some credit here for his honesty, because it took him 200 years to get to the point of this casual Odo that we meet. And here's what a story like this does, or any sort of time travel story like this. It fulfills this fantasy that our older selves can go back and give our younger selves some advice. Now, it's a fantasy because obviously in reality we can't do that. You can't take, 50-year-old you and go back and tell 12-year-old you to do this thing or not do this thing, and then you'll live a better, happier life. That part of it is impossible. But what it does is it serves as a bit of a wake-up, I think, at its best. It serves as a bit of a wake-up to the present-day you who can tell present-day you to maybe, in the case of this story, be a little more honest with your emotions. Or pursue that thing that you think was impossible to pursue anyway, because it might actually just work out in your favor and might actually be better than you had expected it to turn out to be. So I think that's really what we're looking at in a story like this is, what is that actionable thing? What is that relatable present day thing that you can go like, all right, well, the me of the future didn't get around to going back to the me in the past, but there's a me right now who can do something, who can actually, even just one step in a different direction, one shred of courage to do that thing that I didn't think I could do. What happens if I actually do it? Mm-hmm. And that's what Odo is trying to tell Odo. Casual Odo telling formal Odo. It's like, just take that one little bit of a step. Just muster up that one little bit of courage to actually be honest with yourself about your feelings and your feelings for Kira. Casual Odo doesn't know how it'll turn out because that's the timeline that didn't ever happen. That's the timeline that never played out. So maybe Odo would get rejected, but maybe Odo will learn from that because Odo at least has come from another semi-relationship that made him grow as well. So there's another opportunity for growth for him, I will say there's it's a small moment in this episode, but I love that moment of Worf telling the 3 Klingon wannabes, time is their enemy. We should help them defeat it.
That's beautiful, beautiful line.
It was such a beautiful line, and it was such a great moment because here are these Klingon-ish people who have been so focused, bragging about, we've never grown our own food, we kill our own food, and we're trying to live this ultra fundamentalist Klingon version that we've been handed down for the last 8 generations. We think this is what it means to be Klingon. And here's Worf coming in and giving that correction, saying, no, the more important point is that you're a participating member of the society that you live in. And here's how we're going to do it now. We get to treat time as the enemy. The enemy isn't this thing that's out there. It's not another Yarbear or whatever it was that he killed, But I thought that was such a fantastic, almost overlooked line. And He was gorgeous. And then there's a big, big question here hanging over this whole episode. Do the needs of the one outweigh the needs of the many? Because that's Odo's logic. Mm-hmm. And it is the complete opposite of everything that we have learned up until now in Star Trek. It would be very hard for me to just say he's wrong, because there's a lot of other complicating factors here. We don't know about the needs of the many who live outside of this planet on DS9 and all the people that they interact with and the vulnerabilities that they have and the abilities that they have and everything that's happening in the Alpha Quadrant. There's a whole lot of the many there who also need attention, who also have needs. But in this case, Odo is thinking very locally. And I don't know. I don't think this episode could or should be summed up just by saying there was a right decision and that decision was made or that decision was not made. I think that gives this episode a little too short shrift.
Yes.
It is made to let us contemplate this idea. But that's the message that Odo is living by here. And I guess we'll get to see if a message like that crops up again in Star Trek. What about you, Norman? What about other morals, meanings, messages that we're left with?
So just to put this on the record, John and I don't discuss our notes with each other, and we add our notes not really simultaneously into our production into our production notes report here. And I find it fascinating that both he and I brought up the Vulcan philosophy of the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one, and then reversed it in this case because it's so true to what I saw and what I took away from this. And I landed, like John, I landed on the very same thing. The needs of the one outweigh the needs of the few or the many. Does the logic work in this episode? Kira's life for 8,000 or the 8,000 lives for 48? Who has the right to make that choice? Who has the right to dictate what happens to these lives? And I think that question was truly and wonderfully captured in that scene on the Defiant. It's my favorite scene in this episode where Sisko is listening to Dax and the Chief and Bashir and Worf and Kira about her choice. Yeah. And how her faith and how belief system is the will of the prophets. That's the center of this episode. Like, whose will is the right will, right? Whose decision is the right decision? And I do want to reiterate this fact. I love how Miles speaks for pragmatism in this episode about not beholding to Kira's need to fulfill the will of the prophets or to any religious belief. Right. I think that was important for them to have represented in this particular situation, because not everyone is faith-based, and some people are family-based, like Miles. I mean, I think that's it was a hard line of a line or set of dialogue when O'Brien says, "I don't know these people, right? But I have a wife and kids back home who need me." And Kara said, "Your family will be fine, Miles. Like you said before, John, the prophets will take care of them."
It's egregious.
And O'Brien, right? Yeah. And O'Brien says, "No offense, but I don't believe in your prophets." And again, by no offense, meaning that kind of F off. Yeah. How dare you slight my family with such triviality in your tone? Yeah. Right? Yeah. So I guess the question that, from Odo's logic, the question I come away with is ultimately, it's who's ever in charge that gets to dictate the value of lives. And I hate to say it that way, but that's the way I took it from this episode. And in this case, to a small degree, it's Sisko, because no matter how many stories or how many explanations he listened to in the Defiance mess hall, it's his decision ultimately that has to be carried out. Yeah. Right? And I think that they even kind of treated it a little too cavalierly for my taste when he says, "I'm just hearing what I have to say, but it doesn't matter because I already made my decision." Yeah. Right? I agree. Mm-hmm. I don't think that there was enough, at least in direction, enough intent on Sisko really weighing out the odds or really weighing out what this means for him and Jake. I think that was a missed opportunity. Yeah. But for the larger part, it's Odo, because Odo and the Founders, for the most part, in Deep Space Nine, have been identified in this universe as gods. The Jem'Hadar see them that way. The Founders and the Dominion see them that way, or the Vorta. Mm-hmm. And Odo did, in fact, act like a god by making this decision for everyone, especially for Kira, by changing the flight path of the Defiant. He didn't ask anyone's permission. Mm-hmm. He just did it, thereby saving her and changing history. And ultimately, gods are selfish beings. I mean, let's take in part the tradition of the Greek gods. They are selfish beings using mortals to fulfill their every whim. Yeah. That is mythologically, historically, a thing. So, and we've seen this time and again in Star Trek. Okay, let's go back to Apollo in Who Mourns for Adonais. The adulation of mortals in order to fill their vessels for power and their ability to be able to use that power to become gods. Yeah. They need that adulation, right? Mm-hmm. Q is the same way. Right. Q's so bored out of his mind that he needs to play with mortals in order just to be entertained, to find some meaning in his life. Now, I'm not saying this is the case for Odo, but now the Founders and the Changelings in Deep Space Nine, in this narrative we're talking about, are gods. So, in the end, Kira chooses to sacrifice herself. And Miles, he wants to do the right thing after he had that revelation with future Molly. And Dax wants to save the colony. And all these choices were ignored by who essentially was the decision of a selfish god.
Casual Odo, the selfish
Casual
god.
Odo, the selfish god.
Mission Log is produced by Roddenberry Entertainment. Executive producer, Rod Roddenberry. Our website and your opportunity to comment and connect with us is missionlogpodcast.com. If you'd like to support Mission Log directly, you can do so at patreon.com/missionlog. And for more Star Trek news and discussion, be sure to visit trekmovie.com.
On the next Mission Log, Blaze of Glory.
Some of the music for Mission Log provided by Warp 11, online at warp11.com. Casual Odo implies the existence of business casual Odo and formal Odo. End transmission.
Podcast.roddenberry.com, the Roddenberry Podcast Network.